So I'm supposed to introduce everybody on the team, but because in the spirit of collaboration, I think we should collaboratively. I'm not going to be able to talk today, but that's okay. No. I don't have to talk. You guys can talk. And let's start with everybody doing a little intro to who you are and what projects you're going to be talking about today.
Sure. Just go this way?
Yeah. You guys might want to get your mics now.
Do we need them? Yeah. Can you hear if we just talk like this? Or
is it audible?
What, are you kidding? Come on.
Don't you want to feel like a rock star?
I'm still going to try.
Carrie, I have OCD and that pen's on the floor.
I know whose pen that is.
So, hello.
Thank you. It really would have been completely distracting.
I'm Zach Feldberg, and I'm the Senior Manager of Digital Content at Shaw Media for Global and the Factual and Dramatic channels. So mostly that Factual and Dramatic is probably mostly history and showcase. There are tons of other brands and tons of other channels. Those are our main focus from a digital content perspective. And, you know, we've been sort of navigating the waters between product and digital content for the past few years, and I think they're coming into focus now, and it's a really great time to be involved with this kind of thing. So that's me.
All right, I'm Jeff Gomez. I'm the CEO of Starlight Runner Entertainment, and we are friendly toward you guys. If you heard what I said before, it applies to this, and I'm looking forward to talking about how it can really be boots on the ground. I saw a number of tweets about, well, how does it really happen, and so forth, and it's going to be fun talking about the applications here.
I'm Ryan Nadel. I'm a creative director at Zeros to Heroes, and I worked with Zach Feldberg producing and directing all the transmedia content for Continuum, which just wrapped a couple of months ago.
Excellent.
And I'm Phillip Djwa. I'm the president and CEO of Agentic, and we do a lot of work in social change, so doing, using technology for good. And I think that I was asked, and I think you guys didn't, and I feel like kind of like the odd guy out, but I have a reel. So can we play that now? Would that be okay?
Fine by me.
I don't know if that's...
Yeah, go ahead. Is there a reel in the house? Is there a, yeah, there we go. In the meantime, we'll sing a little song before it comes up.
This is not live tweets, right? We were trying to, like, in the speaker room, we were trying to figure out whether, like, this would be something that would be saying things about us while we're up here. And I get the feeling that that's not the case. This is just... okay. Great. Just checking. Well, it doesn't seem like that's happening.
The reel going, I guess somebody can give us a cue. But let's first talk about, since we're talking about merging media, people are coming from different practices. And when they come from different practices and different silos, they speak different languages. And I know, Jeff, you are a great translator, and that's why a lot of people love working with you, because you translate across the different silos. Can you talk a little bit about that process, and then I'll open it up to everybody else?
Well, look, these projects are very, very difficult to execute because they require different silos to melt a little and to start working together. And we have found that if there is at least one faction or even an individual that speaks the language of these different silos and can somehow communicate the same core tenets, the same core requirements across the board in these different languages, then people respond, because again, they feel heard. They feel like you are aware of their concerns. So it's a good idea for any of us to at least pay cursory attention to the development and production processes of other media.
Mm-hmm. Let's continue that thread, and then we'll go to the reel afterwards. So, for you guys on the end there, how do you feel about that translation process when you're in a new collaboration? It's everybody's speaking different languages. How do you navigate that?
If I could, I think that's that notion of requiring translation is true when you're starting from a technology perspective first, which I think is a big mistake. I think if you're starting from story first, then everyone's speaking the same language. Sure, we execute on how we create that experience of story in different ways with different tools. But for example, with Continuum, there was no issue of translation between working with the broadcaster, working with the executive producers and creators of the show and the writers, because we were all just trying to build a world and create a story experience. The technology was very secondary, and we can talk more about that later. So I think it's almost a misconception that translation is required if you're all on the same page, which is a story page first, and everything else is kind of...
If I can just throw in here. You're right, particularly when it comes to what we call native transmedia, or everyone being on the same page from the get-go. But quite often, we're going to experience situations where something's been successful on a particular media platform, but the desire is for it to be extended. We work on a lot of video games, and we come to a first-person shooter video game, and there's a definite sense of story there, but there is no sense on the part of the developer for wanting to alter or modify the story so that it performs better in a novel or a feature film. And that's where you get lots of crappy adaptations of video game content in other media. Again, knowing that language and bridging these two kinds of media has been very helpful to us.
But I think that just example speaks to one of the inherent qualities of video games, which is a technology-first media experience, right?
True,
and
but there are a lot.
How many people here put themselves in the digital media camp? And how many people here put themselves in kind of film and TV? Okay, so I mean, you guys all understand the differences between those two groups. There are a lot of differences. The whole way in which that kind of translation happens is I think, for me, a lot of the learning that I've been able to do in the last little while. It just turns out that, there's just a completely different culture. And I think that understanding that culture is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Because you just have different ways of doing things. You have different ways of talking about stuff. You have different ways of financing things. It all comes down to communication. And if you don't have that in partnership, it's really difficult to get things done.
Let's ask Zach the question about communication and translation.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Ryan's point. We're fresh off Continuum right now, where Ryan being based here in Vancouver and the Continuum production being here in Vancouver, I think that process was very effective. And I think that, without that proximity, both geographically and, creatively, it would have been a lot more challenging to achieve the results that we did, and the results were very good. It was a very successful show extension for us. So, I also think that it was launched with story in mind first and foremost, and there's lots more to talk about that if I don't sort of stop myself, and we could sort of get into it now. So, and I'm sure it'll come out over the course of this panel. So, and I know we want to show the reel.
Yeah. So let's show the reel now. And
Okay.
Is it just one reel, or how many? Is it everybody has a reel?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, you know what? We're gonna play it, and then we'll add context after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who will you meet behind the walls? Be they friend or foe? Fear them. The Sultan who now leads them is Bayabars, the mightiest warrior we've ever seen.
Yet we don't have details. We don't know if it's an accident or if it's human error.
In ice and snow we found beauty, and it taught us to be human.
Yeah, kind of got glitchy there, but there you go.
Come on.
Yeah, thank you.
So this was for your agencies. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things we saw from there and the collaborations that came out of that?
I mean, sure. Like, I think the project that actually three of us were involved in was Battle Castle, which was a pretty major transmedia project. It involved a number of different players. Our TV producer is not. I don't think. Is anyone here from Medieval Media? They're not here today, but they were the other kind of partner in this. Certainly the idea of kind of translation is something that was really key to us kind of getting a real handle on all the different, pieces that we had. I feel like one of the things that, going forward that I think everyone really needs to do is have that really detailed, explicit conversation about how conversations are going to happen, how communication is going to happen. I mean, Jeff, Caitlin and I worked a lot together at Starlight Runner in developing some of the projects, and I really felt that communication was such a key part of the success of that.
Absolutely. We took on Battle Castle as one of our very first non-big Hollywood movie kind of implementations mainly because the mentality from the get-go was one that echoed a lot of the tenets of Transmedia that we like, and they really wanted to execute on it. Right away, with regard to working with you, we knew that there was a similar mindset and an openness to collaboration.
You seem like you have something to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I could break from the official synopsis of what this panel is, because technically, I'm here to sort of talk about collaboration with Ryan about Continuum, but, as Phillip said, Battle Castle being a history project as well, I was involved with that. I wasn't involved with it from the beginning. I came in sort of partway through, but I think one of the biggest strengths was the early engagement. That there was, we don't usually launch a social media campaign that far out of a first broadcast of a show, and I'd actually love to hear you guys speak to that a bit, because I think there was a built-in fan base because you reached out to the right people. Was it a year before broadcast? It was quite a while before. And that was unusual, and that was something that, as a broadcaster, we probably wouldn't recommend per se, but it was something that worked really well. So I'd love to hear you talk about your experience with that a bit.
Yeah.
We at Starlight Runner first heard about the project just before shooting was to be underway. This is a couple of years before it aired.
Yeah.
And they had looked at the sort of work we were espousing and approached us very, very early. And so, to a certain small degree, they were wildly creative guys, but to a small degree, we were able to even influence how they thought about the narrative thread. And this speaks again to the issue of language. A documentary filmmaker on a public broadcasting station or a history channel and so forth is thinking a closed system, 4, 5, 6 episodes, self-contained, says all that it has to say. This dialogue began to be about how, even from the concept of the documentary itself, little threads could be left dangling, little pathways could be set in subtle ways that could allow for us to design things that can take it up from there and bring it to the web or bring it to other media. And that was a sheer pleasure. We had it was one of the first times we were able to do something like that.
It's really interesting because the other thing, and Zach, I think you brought this out, is like the other kind of partner that in this, and I think this is such an important piece, is your audience. And
sure.
Like obviously with Transmedia, that is, they are another partner. And I think that what we tried to do with that is just get as many of those folks involved and engaged as early as we could to have them be a receptive group and participate.
That's right.
And I would add, in terms of translating and communication, one of the things that I had to adapt to or learn about was there are so many layers to communicate to, especially working with, we're kind of, as transmedia producers, at least in the case of Continuum, we were kind of in the middle, right? We're working with the show creators and the writers. We're working with Zach and his digital team. We're working with the marketing department. And we're in a very unique situation in that we're almost touching every component of the project. Whether it's story mythology, to the PR plan with social media, to doing live events, to building out the digital content, and learning who you need to talk to at what stage. Is a very tactical, logistical thing, but it's a learning curve for us.
I want to push you further on that. Let's move into from communication to the working methods and working process, and understanding that moment when you start collaborating people that they have different working methods. And can you talk a little bit about that, because you've been across the spectrum working from the different departments?
Sure. I think as someone working kind of on the digital side of things, there's two factors. One is usually our timelines are a lot more compressed than other people working on a project. In this case, it was a television show. And also, we're used to doing things faster and iterating on them and releasing them, and then knowing we can change them and update them. Whereas someone who's making a television show doesn't have that sense of, we can fix it, right? So knowing that the mindset is different on the other side of the table is important, and also understanding what other people are doing. When someone is producing a television show, they're not going to be able to respond to my needs right away, right? And being patient with that. And then on the broadcaster side, having someone like Zach there who's really in a position to help me communicate with the marketing team, to help me communicate with the PR team, is key, because he knows what they're doing. He knows their schedules. He knows when he needs to tell me, that person's not working here anymore. You shouldn't wait for their approval on that design.
Well, let's bring it back to Zach then. Let's bring it back to Zach, because you were about to say something and I interrupted.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think that's great. And I think we also collaborated probably in a more fulsome way on Continuum than we have on a lot of different show extensions that we've done. And I think it was partly just because of the expectations around the show. I think people thought this could be a really big hit, and I think across the company there were people in publicity and marketing and obviously our team and certainly programming that were just make sure we do everything right. So I think there was a level of scrutiny that Ryan and Matt and the team had to deal with that might have been a little bit...
That was unique to us?
Maybe not totally unique, but it was higher than ever. It was higher than ever on us too, internally, just to make sure that we were really delivering a quality product. So I think, they definitely probably were directly involved with more of our different teams internally than most third-party companies that we would engage with would be. And I think, handled it gracefully. But there were certainly more conversations around that project than I think there have been on any other project that we've done. And I think the nature of the project too, where there's a graphic novel associated, a digital graphic novel associated with the work that Zeros to Heroes did for Continuum, and that goes right into the core of the show world itself and expands the universe, and it's crucial that stuff is directly on point and totally approved by the producers and writers and the creator and all those things. So it was a heavily scrutinized project, and I think it paid off.
And I'll just share an anecdote, I guess, of what I mean. There was one piece of content that we were waiting for approval on, and was trying to get a handle on Simon Barry, the creator of the show, and Pat Williams, one of the executive producers and directors, opinion on what we were trying to get approved. And the only way we could do it was meet them at the Cactus Club while they were having lunch and bring them an iPad and say, pick one. And sometimes you just got to be ready to do that, especially when a show is in production and happening. And people are really busy.
Yeah, I think that's really true to understand from kind of digital media perspective. When the show starts shooting, just the pressure on them and the amount of work that they have to do. I really wish that we had lined up a whole bunch of things before that, because it really just meant they were really focused on the show, right, which is their job, and so it makes it somewhat complicated for the digital media producer, because we're sort of used to getting stuff on a regular basis, and then it suddenly kind of dries up because they're just so busy with the show. But I want to say something with Zach, what you were talking about, just in terms of the kind of added pressure. I'm guessing, and this is totally my conjecture on this, but the fact that this was a really new kind of area for you probably lent some more people kind of looking over your shoulder, and I think that is true. One of the things that we really noticed was that the way that we're all trying to do these different projects is very unique. I mean, that is kind of the hallmark of these transmedia projects. And that means that there is a lot of time and extra, I think, attention and care that we need to do as creators with all of our partners, not just our production partners, but I'm thinking, for example, like Zach was saying, we released, I think, like 4 or 5 iterations of the website before the kind of canonical, battlecastle.tv site. It was hard to explain that in a way that made sense because everyone's kind of used to like the big website at the very end, gets launched, it's the beta, you do your drawdown, it's all good. But we really did a different approach. And that was something that we needed to kind of explain and really get buy-in, and Zach's team was really great at, kind of accepting that and going with it. But it is a different way, and I think you need to have that.
Right.
Let's bring it to Jeff.
Different production processes on different media observe the laws of physics in different ways. And this is one of the things that we had to become very good at explaining. The laws of physics when it comes to producing a flash game versus a kind of an app or the various kinds of elements that go into it. Being able to quickly let the major stakeholder, the financier, the network, and so forth, understand how that process works and how it's impacted by the content that's delivered to us, the scripts, the footage, and so forth, and what happens to us when they're not delivered is something that's very important for everyone to keep in mind because you're controlling expectations a little bit. Now, of course, that doesn't mean much. They want it when they want it. And one of the things that is helpful for a transmedia producer or people who are involved in transmedia implementations to understand is what is that production process and what are the potential shortcuts. I won't talk too much out of school with Battle Castle, but I can talk about Mainframe because they're not around anymore. Mattel.
Jeff, we promised we wouldn't make this a therapy session. Remember? Okay.
Thank you. Mattel wanted. It was June 1st. Mattel wanted a 22-minute episode to ship at the beginning of November of the same year, and the script hadn't been written. In fact, the universe, the story world, had not been conceived yet. What we did, because we understood the process of video game development and hence CG animation development, is we asked Mainframe to list for us all of their existing assets. Everything they had already, all the shapes, all the environments and so forth, and we built the story around those shapes and environments and so forth to cut down on enormous stretches of time that would otherwise have been eaten up. And the story was not so bad, So they got their content delivered because we were sensitive to the needs of the client, the production company, Mattel, but also sensitive to the capabilities of the digital company.
There was one thing that I would add to that too is that one of the other things that happens in a larger collaboration is you start working with a lot of third parties as well, right? So there's not just you, the production company, the broadcasting company, you're also working with a number of other firms that do specialty things. And one of the things that happened to us was that it didn't work because I don't know why, the kind of glitchy thing, but that castle kind of spins and you can kind of twirl it around. Anyway, we had asked for this from the CG company who was contracted by the TV production company. Anyway, they were delivering them on a relatively slow aspect, and we realized that it was because they were rendering them for full HD. Now, the only place they were ever going to show up was the web, and we kind of needed them because our deadlines were coming up. And so it was like this really interesting awareness that suddenly we had like, well, oh, you're rendering it for HD. We don't need that. We don't need that. I mean, it's great. We love it, but we don't need that high quality. And so they were able to kind of like reflect on that. And I think that was just another example of how these expectations and sort of the way that things are done, of course they're going to do it in HD for broadcast because that's what they need to do. But for us, these were only ever going to be on the web. It didn't make sense. And we just didn't have that conversation with them beforehand.
Let's bring it back to Zach. You made a point before that you came into a project not at the beginning. So can you talk a little bit about how coming into collaboration when you're at a halfway point? And I know with Jeff that happens with you a lot as well, and I think probably with you too.
Yeah, it's certainly never ideal. You want to be there right at the very beginning, from the pitch stage all the way through. And I think this one was sort of a shifting of roles and responsibilities. So I was mostly on drama, and then I think when factual became part of my mandate, then, all the projects that came with it also came with. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was very far along at that point by the time we started working together. So it's challenging, and, I think there are certain things that we could have collaborated more closely on if it was the same person all the way through, but because when things change hands, certain things don't happen as cleanly as they might otherwise. So I don't know that there's that much more to elaborate on for me, but we made it work, and we worked together on those challenges with the HD video and trying to figure out how to make it happen in a timely fashion. Thankfully, like I was saying before, it had a built-in audience because of all the outreach that had been done at that point. So the medieval community, which I didn't even know necessarily existed, was like in full force. Like, it was pretty amazing to inherit that and already have an audience. So, it was a great project. But yeah, it would have been awesome to be there right from the start. So yeah.
With Ryan first.
Yeah, with Continuum it was interesting. I didn't get involved in the project until it had already been pitched and greenlit, and we were kind of ready to go into production. And I kind of inherited this package. And on one hand, it would have been great to have been involved in kind of more of the early kind of pitching and conceptual phase. But kind of from an executional and kind of creative perspective, already having boxes to put your ideas into almost made it easier in a sense, and allowed me to get into it faster and for kind of things to run pretty smoothly. So, I obviously didn't come into it in the middle. I was able to kind of shape my team and put things in place as I wanted them. But inheriting a really structured design was nice. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, we were very involved early on. Is Sue Bealey, is she in the audience there? She was really the one that kind of got me, to meet my TV producers early on, and that was really great because it was at a real formative stage. They had some kind of ideas, They weren't the kind of TV producers that said, "Oh, we want puzzles and games." You hear that a lot. It's like, "Oh, we want puzzles and games." Anyway, they were much beyond that, and so early on, we really had a chance to kind of develop, a story. And I was going to actually mention too that one of the communication tools, that I think for any project is really good is that kind of mythology, the Bible that you guys, created for that. Maybe you could mention that as something that gets everyone on the same page.
It's funny. In some ways, it was a heartbreaker because the Battle Castle mythology, which is a kind of series Bible, to me, it stands as a kind of textbook, a companion to the series. You could teach the darn thing out of that Bible. It was really well done by Caitlin and her team. Kind of as a sequel to what I was talking about this morning, we had to look at Battle Castle from very early on and understand our route into this. And I said, guys, you have to peel away the fact that you're nerds and love castles in the first place. What is the route that the audience is going to take into this series? And in examining what the plans were initially, I thought to myself, if our homes are our castles, then these castles were someone's home. And when you create a route in to to this and get the audience to understand that these were places where people lived with their families and so forth. It just makes it more contemporary. It brings a contemporary sensibility to this documentary series, and thematically, we wanted to make sure that that aspect was somehow injected into every aspect of the transmedia implementation. Maybe we succeeded in some more than others, but still, it informed our movement, and that came out of this Bible.
Well, I mean, and that's really true, because really what we did online that was different than the show. The show, if you haven't seen it, is a 6-part series on castles that changed history, and it's narrated by, apparently the very sexy Dan Snow. So he has another whole audience that follows him. But really, the show was about the castles and and their role in history. And so what we really picked up on, and that was through the Bible, was the people. Like, where are the people? We didn't really get into that in the series because in a 1-hour doc, it's hard to get into everything. So online, it was really a focus on people. So the character.
That's right.
And actually, the interesting part of being part of a documentary series and the kind of high-level professionalism around facts, and then trying to introduce character where, that whole area that, starts to get hazy was a really interesting process. But, I just want to say that was a really great division in how we kind of approach the TV series versus the online.
Yeah.
So I really liked what you brought up about, there's we're getting now into best practices for collaboration. So what about you, Ryan? You were talking before about, they were talking about show Bibles. What was your guys' approach to the whole continuum?
Well, as I said earlier, the starting point has to be the story, and there'd been a lot of work done with Continuum already. When we kind of started working on the transmedia component, with a very thorough show Bible, most, if not all, of the scripts for the 10 episodes were finished at that stage. So that was obviously the starting point, and the most important part, or most important factor, was that we had one of the writers of the show embedded with our team.
Wonderful. Excellent.
And he spent 3-4 months essentially sitting with me and designing and building and brainstorming and writing and helping communicate with the show creators and with the producers and just helping with that process because he had a relationship with them, and that was so key to the success of it.
And still so rare, people. It's just shocking to me how rare that is.
But it's
so
changed
you're very
in the last
fortunate.
year.
I don't know whose idea was that. Was that Showcase's idea or was that Simon's idea? Oh, it was Simon's. Simon's got all the good ideas.
Which idea?
About embedding Jerry.
That just came. I thought it came through you. I don't know, but it was a great idea, and it's like some of the best projects we've done have had that kind of relationship, and we strive for it all the time. Like the more embedded we can be, like we've had shows in the past where the digital production company has been physically embedded on set with the actual production and like at all times, doing all their work from there, basically setting up shop there. And the results, like they just clearly speak for themselves there's a huge advantage to doing that. There's obviously an expense associated with it, and it's not the easiest way to do things, but you always get a more authentic product. It's much closer to the show itself. So yeah, I mean, it was I think that,
and that was another factor
really well.
too. They shot most of the gunfights behind our office. Full automatic weapon gunfire. So it's hard not to be a part of the set and a part of the process and the experience.
So that brings up another area that we were going to talk about. That sometimes in international collaborations or across Canadian collaborations, we're doing everything through digital, and we don't have that face-to-face moment or that dynamic in the room. How do we navigate those things, and what are the best practices for those kind of relationships?
You got to make it happen. You got to get in the same room.
Yeah, I think, one of the projects I was alluding to just now was the Drunken on Drugs Happy Fun Time Hour, which was done with Stitch. And, show was being shot in Halifax. They were based in Halifax. And you could not have one without the other by the end of it. So if you watched that show, you were going to go to the website to experience the stuff that extended the show. It was baked right into the end credits. Like the thing continued right through. it was shot with a lot of the same crew and the same people, and creatively it was all part of the same sort of message. So that was really successful. And then I think since that happened, we always kind of thought, okay, we need to make sure that if we're shooting something else that is we're not there all the time. We're based in Toronto, so when Continuum came up, and we knew we had the enthusiasm of the producers who were really excited about doing all sorts of things online. We had I think it was like a 10-page document from them about the different ways we could take the show digitally, and it was getting that kind of enthusiasm right out of the gate, and then feeling it internally at Shaw, and then being able to bring it out to different producers that we wanted to have pitch back to us was that the momentum was perfect, and then finding a great company here that we could work with on it. It was kind of a perfect situation. So yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, and I'd add, for us, it was international co-production with UK with a company called Ballista Media. And what was the interesting thing is like, and Catherine Winkler says this all the time, you can't do it all. And there's a real ecology around here of firms that do different things. And this worked out really well with Ballista because in terms of the digital media stuff, they released an iPad. They're actually doing a book, Battle Castle book, kind of glossy, coffee table book. And then also they're doing an iPad companion to the book using video from the show. So it's a really smart thing because it wasn't what we were doing, and they had a natural strength in that. And I think that's so important about partnership. You got to find people that are good in those different areas, and it makes a lot of sense in this, and especially in our little neck of the woods. There's so many talented people here. I really want to strongly encourage this kind of collaboration across these different companies. We all can do different things, and we all do these different things well. Let's work together and make a larger ecology.
Right.
We've been given the 5-minute mark,
okay.
So I just want
Let's talk about disaster.
the work divorce.
We've been very fortunate working with Canadian companies. There are very few Canadian-American co-pro kinds of deals that can be had, but because there is a need for transmedia producer expertise, it's allowed us to take a kind of transmedia producer credit on some Canadian projects, and yes, that face-to-face collaboration is great, particularly at the beginning. Once that's underway, everything is cool. There was a video game company that is now defunct that we were sent to by their parent publisher to help with extending the narrative across multiple platforms. They thought they had a concept that would make a great movie. They were very excited about it. But the game had already been well underway in terms of its development. We looked at the narrative and said, there are several things about this that while it's an okay game, it's not going to lend itself to vast expansion. The story world is very, very locked down and kind of concludes. If you blow up everything at the end, there's not too many places to go. So we said, would you mind tweaking these aspects? It doesn't change your through line. It doesn't change your theme. It doesn't alter your character too much, except maybe he lives. And they said, no, absolutely not. We're not doing it. And they said they paid lip service to their bosses that this would be transmedia, but in their minds, no. It's just what it is. And that is, it was a failure. We failed in the end. Why? We were not there early enough to bond with them, to make them understand that we were on their side and that the contribution would only help everyone in the end. And so we didn't quite get it.
So we have 2 minutes left. So if we could just do a rapid fire, 30 seconds, best practice. What's the thing that sticks with you in collaborations that everybody should keep in mind? Starting with you.
I would say like getting in early and being really explicit about a communication. By the end, we had like a process that kind of involved how we were going to communicate back and forth around approvals that was really clear. And I think that would be something I'd really recommend.
Agreed.
When story drives everything, the gimmick factor is reduced.
Setting expectations clearly in writing.
Yeah, that's not far from what I was going to say. I think no, it's okay. I mean, it's crucial. You have to start at the very beginning with it's got to be in writing. It's probably got to be in like a legal agreement of some kind with dates and clear details about what's being delivered. Because then there's no question. What's that?
Such a broadcaster.
I know, I'm sorry, but it's true because otherwise it gets a little gray and it's like, well, yeah, no, it can be late, or yeah, I guess you don't have to deliver that. But if it's clear what's expected, and then there's no debate, and that's really important. So yeah, I agree.
I think this is a fantastic panel. I loved the collaborative style you guys all had. And I think everybody should give it up for these guys for this great collaboration. And I just want to say my advice is to, cross-mingle and network tonight at the Transmedia Canada launch party.
Thank you.
Oh, we got a Q&A.
We got Q&A?
Q&A.
At Jeff_Gomez if you want to tweet back and forth.
More about expectation management. So one of the first questions that a client of mine would ask if I propose a transmedia project for them would be, what if nobody installs the app, or what if nobody plays the game, or nobody goes or buys this thing that you're proposing, and that we're going to put thousands of dollars in development, right?
Me.
So it's been I don't know if this is risk management that we're talking about, or expectation management?
No, look, the one of the main reasons why why Starlight Runner has gotten to where it's gotten is that we're not radical about all of this. We're using your established infrastructure, your established marketing programs, and everything. It's never that we have to convince you that there needs to be an app. It's that we have to convince you that the app has to help to tell the story. Okay? So maybe that's going to cost you a few dollars more, but you were going to make something anyway. You have a budget. You're going to spend it to make people aware of this program. Don't think of it as a fight to gain new platforms. Your financing situation, the way that your government is handling you kind of have to put this on multiple platforms these days in order to get to maximize your funding. So then it's just about shifting the perspective on what is going into these products so that they help to expand your story world, nurture your brand and your franchise, and more fully and completely engage your audience. And that much I think you can do.
We've got another question there.
Allow me to pull a Gordon Gekko or Kevin O'Leary here. All too often we judge success on whether it's artistically good. From a monetary point of view, did you, with Battle Castle or Tron or any of the other ones, were they successfully monetized?
Tron was pretty successful monetized. I'm kind of like, just look at the soundtrack of Tron was really successfully monetized. There's so many elements.
Just to speak to Tron briefly, what's fascinating about Tron was that movie was not a colossal global blockbuster. Okay, it did good, but it left to its own devices, Disney may have decided not to put a sequel to it. However, the multi-platform implementation developed a fanatical following because it all made sense, right? It's one of those, story worlds that people loved, and it yielded an animated series that was really successful for the Walt Disney Company, enough for them to go, you know what? Let's go. Let's do a feature film sequel. So that's an instance where the Transmedia actually pushed it past the tipping point and allowed the franchise to continue.
I want somebody else to answer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think from our perspective, in terms, I can't speak to Tron, but for Continuum on Showcase and Battle Castle on History, like we look for certain KPIs to be satisfied. So there's obviously the revenue perspective is extremely meaningful, and we're looking for that, and that's increasingly important, I would say, because I think a lot of the work we have done over the years has been more folded a little bit more into marketing and also certainly into content. So it's almost like it would have been enough at a certain point to just expand the show and sort of enrich the world, and then we've done our job. But there's also just did it expand the show? Did it help with the marketing campaign? And then was it successful even from just keeping people on our main site, like on showcase.ca or history.ca. And I think to different degrees they were. It's sort of, it's each one is totally different, but those are all important things we look at.
We have another one up there.
Oh, hi there. I work for a company called Nerdcore, and we've done pretty well by having our Transmedia division in-house. Our Transmedia productions have done fairly well for us. We've had some time to get there. But we aren't experiencing a lot of the issues it sounds like you have from collaboration with film and television producers because it is in-house. Based on that experience, I tend to want to encourage film and television producers to do it in-house. Do you have any reasons why that wouldn't work, or you'd see that as a hurdle?
I can for us, I think that...
Hello.
No, seriously though, I think that that is probably the model that I see being really successful is film and TV producers getting interactive kind of divisions. I think the reason why though is not because what you might expect. It's because the way in which I see a lot of TV producers needing to operate is that they need to have the final say, and it's difficult sometimes to have that relationship with a co-producer. And I think that the point would be that there's still a lot of fear around interactive, and there's a lot of different aspects. With all due respect, I just hate the question about monetization. I know it's there at the root of everything, but there's a lot of ways that you can monetize. But the point being that I think that for TV producers, they need to have that control in a way that having an internal person, that can actually also, I think, spend the more valuable time going through the different aspects and and getting the producers on board. There's still, I think, a lot of opportunity there, and I think that is going to be a successful model. So
we have a question up there, and I think we should give Ryan a chance to speak. So I hope it's a good question. I haven't just given you a time bomb.
Good thing I planted one in the audience.
Oh, I guess there was it. Was there another question?
Any other question?
Well, we could just sit here and be entertaining for a few minutes. How about that? I think I just want to bring back to that idea of the artistic vision and the monetization. We can have both. Like Salvador Dali made great art, and he worked for Hollywood too. I don't think that things have to be divorced. Okay, Ryan.
Hi, my name's Warren. I come from 30 years of physical production management and line producing. And when you talk about cost and budgeting and monetization and all of that, and looking at a series like Continuum, where there's a tight schedule to get the scripts out, there's a tight schedule to get them produced, and at the same time, there's a lot of minds going into play to figure out an alternative revenue stream because they want to gamify the content or put on a parallel story. But at the same time, both of those things need production in the sense of being able to capture additional elements, expand on the virtual city, all those kinds of things. They all cost money to do. And when that's trying to be fit into a production budget, where does it sit with the producers and the people that are funding? Because a lot of those people are looking at the license fee for what we'll today call broadcast. Is there a valuation a parallel valuation that's going to come to say, hey, this is worth it to put X number of dollars in every episode budget to capture elements to make the game or the interactive better? Do you see that coming?
I'll respond to part of that question, then hand it off to Zach, because he's got more insight into how budgets are allocated. But I think it's really interesting when you think of how other means of marketing or content are valued or evaluated. It's much more of an abstract process. So, for example, the New York Times has been selling full-page ads in the Sunday paper for $1 million for years, right? And they have data about how many people read their paper and what the demographics are and all that stuff. But it's more conjecture or estimation than anything else. And people just accept that, and they keep paying for that. When it comes to digital, though, we have such granular data about what people are doing, how they're doing it, who's doing it, how long they're doing it for, that almost the granularity of the data makes the experience somehow seem less valuable, because especially if you're monetizing things through associated marketing content or commercial content, the nature of advertising is not that you show an ad for toothpaste and someone immediately clicks on that ad and then goes and buys toothpaste. The whole point of marketing is that they've seen that ad for Crest, and then the next time they're in Shoppers Drug Mart, something clicks in their mind and they choose Crest. So the fact that we can measure whether or not they clicked on that banner ad, and that then correlates to the value of your content, your digital extensions for Continuum, is not a fair assessment, right? It's much more of a holistic evaluation that I think is necessary. And ironically, we don't have the vocabulary or metrics to apply that to digital in the same way that we do to billboards and buses and movie trailers and all that other stuff. So I think there's still an evolution in actually identifying the true value in this type of content. And Zach, maybe you can...
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points, and I think what we're seeing at Shaw right now, and I'm sure it's probably similar, across this industry, is that historically digital has been a total other. It's been a very separate department, and now the kinds of questions that are coming up are things like, okay, if I tell people in programming, if I tell our senior leaders on the programming side that something was successful, they'll want to know why, and they won't want to know why because they won't want me to say, oh, it got X amount of page views. They'll want me to somehow quantify that and compare it to how many people watched it on air. And right now, I don't think there's adequate vocabulary to fully express that. So we have an analytics team on our digital team. We have a research team for the more conventional broadcast business, and they're working together more closely than ever, to the point where some people from one team are going to the other and sort of changing roles slightly to hopefully get to a place where it's all the same. It's like a person watching or interacting with the show is that's a person. That's all that matters. That's where we're headed, and I don't think we're there yet exactly, but that's the goal.
30 seconds.
Okay. Just to put a completely different spin on the answer to your question, for the first 7 or 8 years of my company's existence, we were paid out of marketing. Now we're paid out of development. The studios are considering that they are making an investment into their intellectual property and into the health of the brand, the franchise, whatever you want to call it, on a long-term basis. And wouldn't that be nice?
So I think that's it. That's our time. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience.